we walk around, you feel like you're worthless, right? Like you feel like nobody cares about you. So you live like nobody cares about you and you create that environment, right? I felt like I was hated by my parents and I felt like I was rejected. So I put that on society as I was going to become that guy. And it was just the lens I walked around with, and it became my reality. And so we see all these kids who are taught and treated like they're nothing. They're worthless or they're less than. And we wonder why they act that way. Well, because that's how they feel. And how we feel, obviously, the Bible says what's in our heart comes out and it becomes who we are. And 100% what we feel about ourselves becomes our reality.
Pastor Bobby, welcome to Discover More.
Thank you.
In 2023, as I said in the introduction, the World Health Organization has declared loneliness to be a pressing global health threat, with the U.S. Surgeon General saying that loneliness mortality effects are equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Any thoughts?
I expect that nowadays. We're always about more and big, but we're not about deep anymore. So you see America's always like, go big, connect with more people, but when we do that, we lack depth.
So, and what do you think the trade-offs of depth and width are? Because I think you represent what a healthy community can look like and being the pillar of that, right? So because we're chasing the width versus the depth, like, do you have any concerns and what do you think about the trade-offs?
Yeah, I mean, as a society, I think that we stop looking at people as human. You know, I think there's a number of things that contribute to that. You know, obviously, we're staring at screens more than people. We're treating them all like screens, and we're talking to them like they're just a screen, not a person and a human being. So I think we're lacking that humanity, and you see it even in social media and everything. I think the trade-off is that we treat people less like people, and we tend to be less present.
I know in offline you told me that your brother is a pastor of like a giga church, right? And I think you intentionally chose a more micro. And as a former policymaker who became a clinician, I think I see the constant trade-off between utilitarian, let's impact as many quantifiable people as possible, but then in the process of that, you sort of lose the origin of where you came from. Why do you feel like you chose this more micro approach?
Yeah, I feel like I didn't choose it. I feel like it was more true to who I was. I don't like to connect with a lot of people. I like to have a core comfort team, and I felt like that fit more with who I was. I feel like in ministry, too many times we're trying to step out of who we are to become who everybody thinks we should be, like the stage guy. And I think I had, because of maybe, I don't know if it's my Enneagram, my personality, I don't know what it is. In order to be the best me I could be, I had to be in a space where it was more intimate. And so I had to be true to that. And that's part of being healthy as a leader too.
There is a famous physician, his name is Gabor Mate. He talks about this struggle between like authenticity and conformity. Like a lot of us, we want to feel conformed in terms of feel belonged.
Yeah.
Right? Like for example, if you're gay, right? But then your family's loving, they support you, but they may not be accepting of your sexuality. So for that individual, they have to choose between, do I want to be my authentic self? Or do I want to conform to my family because they do love me? And often they choose the conformity because of loneliness. I sense that from what you just said.
I see that so much in every area, that pressure to conform, especially in communities like the Brown community and the Hispanic community. You know, we're taught from family is everything. But I never fit in because I was a stepson, because I was my stepfather they're from different gangs, they hated each other. So I never was able to fit in. And I even have a saying that a mantra that I kind of went with was, if you're not created to stand in, or if you don't fit in, then you were created to stand out. And I was more designed to stand out. And when I accepted that, I felt more healthy and strong. But yeah, definitely, I think that's always there. And that pressure is always going to be there. Getting used to that pressure is the hard part.
I think that actually leads into your Passion LA, right? I think, in my opinion, your organization that you created with your wife, Passion LA, your mission is unique because you're very focusing on cultivating in-community leaders rather than importing talents and brains from elsewhere.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is your high emphasis? And what do you think that makes it really unique in that sense, especially in urban settings that you work?
When I was younger and I would look at leaders and people who would come into our community, I thought it was so amazing that they were speaking and they were giving their time and energy. But I also felt like their because we live in a community where it's less about what you say, it's about who you are that speaks louder. In the Hispanic community or even in the urban community, because you're watching how people act, because what they say is worthless, you can still end up getting shot, put in jail, whatever it is. So you learn to just watch how people are, and that speaks loudest. And I didn't see a lot of people up there that were like me. So what I was hearing was, you can do it, but you'll never attain the status like me, because that's what I was seeing. I never saw the people like me that came through the same trauma. And when they did look like me, they were like a version of me that wasn't from my context. They didn't experience the trauma. They didn't experience the poverty, none of those issues. So I think it was really important that it goes beyond just what I'm saying and my knowledge of your environment, but I went through your environment, and that speaks to you to say, you can do this too. And so I wanted to see leaders like that. So when I started to create Passion LA, that was my focus.
It's almost like you're trying to maybe address the barriers, right? Because my first pivot from the private sector was through Teach for America. So I spent a couple of years in inner city Philadelphia teaching inner city students, Black and Brown youth. And at first, my biggest fear was, how would Black and Brown youth accept me as their teacher? I'm from a more privileged background. Everything I have now is the byproduct of my parents' sacrifice, but education, which a lot of the Black and Brown youth lack. So that was my fear. I was like, oh, can they relate? Will they open up to me? I look different. I talk different. I didn't experience the deep poverty, drive-by shootings experience on a daily basis. And what I realized is, through time, if you show up, if they feel your energy and love, that barrier dissipates.
100%. And that's not more than that too. Being your authentic self. You know, it's definitely consistency, because love is showing up every time, right? Most of our fathers it's not that they were just bad, it's that they weren't present. You know, that's why we felt the lack of love. But someone who was actually there and trying, it shows a lot. It tells us a lot. It speaks to us. But here's the other thing, being authentic, because we read everything that people are saying because it's a matter of survival. So you develop an instinct. My brother says we're like bloodhounds. We're like smelling what you're about as you're speaking to us, and we're less listening to what you say, but we're watching your mannerisms, looking at your face. And I'm only speaking from my context, right? And so because we're doing that, we need to know that what you're saying, you mean, and even if it's not what I agree with, it has to come from your heart. And so the authenticity on top of the consistency is very important. That's why when I started speaking, I would speak about my trauma, because I needed to tell them who I was before I even spoke anything else to them.
So when you approach like the Black and Brown youth you work with, right, maybe who doesn't know who you are, maybe they're not even believers. Like, what's your approach to build rapport in a very fast way? Because therapists' main job is to build rapport.
Yeah.
Establish physical, emotional safety in this container that you feel called to share a piece of yourself. And we get to witness their burden and witness their journey. So can you share maybe not tactics, but your approach that you take when you approach a new person? Maybe you're thinking about sharing God's grace with them, or maybe provide a physically safe space for them to rest because their home life is so difficult.
So I never think about sharing God with them until I have a relationship with them. I'm never like walking up and just preaching at them. That's not going to work. It doesn't work. You see the guys with the megaphones yelling out the corner. No one's
going to hell.
Yeah, no one's responding to that, right? I always say you could have take that 2 hours and just talk to people and had a lot more impact on the community. So my approach to people is usually just to make them feel important and care about them. So I when I stand in front of a kid, that kid is my kid. Like, I'm loving that kid as if it's my own son. When I'm standing in front and I'm speaking to that kid like that, like, I'm not giving them advice. I'm just hearing them. I'm not judging them. I'm just loving them for that moment, because I might not see them again, and I want them to feel that, because I didn't feel that growing up. The great thing about growing up in a lack of certain things in the community, you know what you're missing. So I knew that sometimes I step in front of you and you need me to be a father. And for that moment, I'll be a father figure or a brother figure, whatever you need. And I'm just filling it out and I'm listening to what you're saying, because most of us don't feel heard. And I'm not judging you. I'm validating you as a person and caring for you.
That reminds me about something I think a lot about in my clinical practice, where I have this idea or thought in the forefront of my mind where, based on how I act as a therapist for my clients and patients, I am the vanguard of their experience. For some reasons, if I do something that turns them off, they may never seek therapy ever again, because I could be the catalyst for positive change or negative change. Do you think about that?
All the time. all the time. I'm a representative of love. I want to represent love to them and care for them. I think about every moment. We call it game day, like when we're in front of a kid. I have to delete anything that's of myself, any insecurities, because the kid is going to automatically reject me, because that's how it works in the neighborhood. It's an automatic rejection until I can trust you. So I expect rejection. I'm consistent and caring. I'm honestly thinking about all that stuff too. So it's all in my mind. Yeah.
I know you're used to rejections because you've been doing this for a while. And I feel like rejection is like a core part of your trauma and growing up, right? So before we go into your upbringing, like, can you share your maybe internal landscape? Like, what thoughts are you saying? Is it just affirming empathy for them, saying that, hey, they're rejecting, it's not personal, this is just a projection of their hurt? Like, what's your internal process look like?
Like, I'm asking them questions, and then I'm expecting the rejection. So they're not interested at all what I have to say. That's fine, because I don't expect them to, because I haven't earned that right yet. I haven't earned the right to be that. I'm just focusing on how I can celebrate them. Like, they'll say something like, I'm like, how's school? And they're like, oh, I've only got C's. That's pretty good though, man. You know what I mean? A lot of guys don't have those. So I'm looking for the reasons to celebrate them and let them know they're cared for. And I'm just asking about their life. Hey, how was your day? I mean, what did you do? And then I know that I'm going to see them again. The important thing is finding their name and then remembering something that they're talking about so that I can follow up later. So I'll be walking down the street and I'll follow up with that kid later and just say, hey, what's up, man? I'm also looking for some kind of connection in the sense of, because every town in LA is a small town within a big town. They're all connected. I'm looking for some connection. Do you know this guy? Oh yeah. So that's it. Look, everything to just make this kid feel like he is so important, because they are. And I want them to feel that way.
I want to segue into the documentary I watched during my research, La Raza. Apologize for my mispronunciation. I barely passed Spanish too. So in the documentary, you said kids who feel like they're nothing, they live like they're nothing.
Yeah.
Can you expand?
So that's a very big thing. So we walk around, you feel like you're worthless, right? Like you feel like nobody cares about you. So you live like nobody cares about you, and you create that environment, right? I felt like I was hated by my parents, and I felt like I was rejected. So I put that on society as I was going to become that guy. And it was just the lens I walked around with, and it became my reality. And so we see all these kids who are taught and treated like they're nothing. They're worthless, or they're less than. And we wonder why they act that way. Well, because that's how they feel. And how we feel, obviously, the Bible says what's in our heart comes out and it becomes who we are. And 100%, what we feel about ourselves becomes our reality. We see these kids who have been molested, and they feel like their only value is in sex. And so they just start to have a lot of sex. And I understand that that's just part of the process. So what I'm working at is not like, how do I change the behavior, but how do I change the heart of who this kid is and who they feel like they are? I always say, as a pastor, it's not my job to tell them who they are. It's my job to be a mirror and remind them of who they really are. They're better than that. They're stronger. When I would walk in the juvenile hall, the first thing I would tell the kid is, you don't belong here. And it would just it would shock them into like, really? And then they would start paying attention. But yeah, 100%, I see that all the time.
Yeah, I've interviewed and friends with quite a few like criminal forensic psychologists who work in prison settings. Yeah. And their patients are their inmates, right? And so I know a lot about the criminal justice systems and how they use numbers to label inmates, to dehumanize them, because they're numbers. By the time they leave prison, they know two numbers by heart. Their CDCR number, which is their jail number, and their record number, which is what they need for their parole or probation officers. I'm saying that because one of my favorite friends, she's a psychologist, criminal psychologist, she said that by me asking, hey, what is your name, during their assessment or intake, a lot of their inmates are shocked because nobody has ever asked them, what is your name? They just say, hey, 0426. It's just a number. Yeah. But that number or any labels diminishes our humanity.
Oh, yeah. And you see that. These kids feel like, I always say they feel like a co-star in their own show. They're not actually a main person. They're watching their parents go through this life and this time, and they're fighting, and they're drug addicts, but they're not important to themselves. And so there's no so they feel like that, right? And we're seeing that over and over again, where there's no feeling of importance. There's no important feeling of value, because they're always a co-star. They're always just hidden on the side. My mom and dad were drug addicts and alcoholics, and they lived that lifestyle, and I'm just here going with them. And then even when you take up that mantle and become like them, you're still just a co-star. The world is owned by people who live in suburbia, and I'm just a nobody.
I want to zoom into that and then go back to another thing you said before. If Christ had an opportunity to choose, I really believe he will be in the ghetto. I want to highlight this because many often forget, believers or non-believers, that Christ came to save the people that were deemed as irredeemable and lost by society. That's the population I work with as a forensic clinician. That's the population you work with, trying to strengthen this community into its potential. I'd love for you to share, because why do you think this is such an important thing we should project on a messaging board? Because I don't know, I think in this white Christianity culture that we live in, I think there is this little bit of privilege attached to being a Christian, right? If you really think about what a Christian looks like, you think about a white person dressed really well in a church, singing with the songs on a Sunday, So I would love for you to share like the reality of what you're talking about.
So yeah, I feel like when I read the Bible, when I look at the life of Jesus, he was a person who would go to the prostitutes. When he said that, when I read that and understood that, he would go to the prostitutes and everything. I felt like he would go to the drug dealers. I had it on that my life, and I felt, if you constantly, Jesus is telling us that. I think that sometimes we're divorced from who Jesus really was, and we read into this. We have this religious idea of what people have told us he was. But when you actually read the scriptures, he was a minority. He was he grew up in Nazareth, which was the ghetto, like you said earlier. It was like the Compton of that day. He comes from all that. And I think he did that on purpose in order to show the value. But I think the church nowadays has become a business. And I'm not speaking about every church. I want to still have to be able to speak at other churches after this.
I don't know if I can handle the massive church hate either. Yeah.
No, but in churches in general, what we see nowadays is they fall into the business model. I go bigger, I go more, but they miss out on the mission. So the mission has become, how do I become the biggest business? How do I get the biggest platform? But they miss out on the mission that Jesus actually gave us, which was to reach people and change lives and to focus on those who have less in order to empower them. And Jesus was that. So, exactly, when I feel like I'm going for those kids, you never know which one of those kids is that, like Jesus for his era. He's going to lead people, change people's lives. I just feel like the urban community has been so not looked at or not focused on in Christianity, but it's like Jesus told that because he knew that was the gold mine. There are so many people in there that are going to be so beneficial to the church and be helpful and a blessing to the church. I always talk about like my daughter and everything like that. People I've met who were these kids who nobody looked at. They were just these hood kids. And then when we started to focus on them and we started to help them and love them and care for them, and they felt like it was their mission, they became this big old blessing to not just our organization, but the church as a whole, because they're in communities doing great things like that.
Yeah, like you said, gold mine. I feel like if Jesus came to LA, because people don't know how segregated LA is.
Yeah.
Like you can literally walk a block, $4 million average house pricing, the next street is Skid Row, right? Impoverished, addictions, feeling lost, feeling marginalized. And I feel like Jesus will be very stoked in this climate because there's a lot of grace to be saved. But I think with popular people like Joel Osteen, right? So you're saying that having 4 different jets and refusing people when hurricane came, you're saying that's not the way to go?
It's weird because as a organization, I understand the decisions that they have to make for their businesses at a certain point. As a person from the urban community, I don't understand. But I think what happens is we get out of the idea of the church as a movement and we create it as a business network, and I'm going to create the biggest business. And so the movement says, when you win in the hood, I win in suburbia. So if I have a plane, well, I can sell that plane and help you, things like that, And we have to be very careful because that's the Judas thing, right? You should sell that and give it to the poor. So we have to be very careful, and I can't judge them. They're fighting their battle. I don't know the uniqueness and the nuances of what their struggle is. But I also understand that I'm fighting for this kid's life because he's going to get murdered because he's a gang member, and you're fighting for a bigger building. And that, I just can't reconcile that. So yeah, yeah.
Do you think, let's say in the future, you do get bigger, there are more opportunities, people resonate with your mission statement? is this something that you're willing to put your body down to really abide? Because I think it's easy for us to say, yeah, in the future, when certain opportunities come, I'm going to say no. I will operate based on my morals and ethics. It's easy to say before seeing the opportunities on the horizon. Right? I went through that this year. I was doing star chasing for a bit, going after the biggest guest for collab reasons. And I had to really move through the season to understand that's not the end goal. And at least with podcasting, my platform, it doesn't have direct translation. But for businesses and organizations, there are direct correlations. Yeah. So it's a bit personal question, but how will you ensure that when you cross that bridge one day, you're going to stay true to your mission?
I'm not. And also, I don't think that I have to sacrifice the idea of being, I think there's just a balance. You have to always question. I question myself, I think in a very healthy way, where I used to do it. I'm constantly saying, am I doing this? What is my purpose for doing this? And I get in that mode too, where I'm like seeing one of my favorite guys is my friend Jose. He does what I do, but he's in schools doing this. And I'm like, I want to do that. And I have to question myself and say, is that getting to me to where I want to be? So I always think about my deathbed. Because growing up, you always thought about death. My dad was murdered. So I always thought about it in a very negative way. Now I think of it as when I'm laying there looking at the roof, what am I going to be satisfied with what I did? And if I'm not, I know me, I will not be satisfied with big. I will be satisfied with impact. And so at the end of the day, I always think to myself, is this impact or is this just about growth? But I don't negate growth as if I'm not hiding from growth or saying I hate growth, because what if that's part of the impact, right? Because let's be honest about this. I'd have to reach more and I have to build more resources in order to reach more. So there's that balance that you always have to question and yourself. Am I being authentic to how God is, the mission that God has created me to do? And that's how I feel.
One of my biggest reflections for 2023, as we're recording this on the last day of the year, is like the concept I coined it as currency of desire. What I mean by that is, I think years ago when I left the private sector to pursue impact, I think I prided myself as like a chip. Oh, I chose impact over money. I gave up a lot of money for my career pivot. But then over time, as I matured, especially now, I think I understood everyone is given with different presets of desires, wiring, genetic, the blessings, the calling by God. And based on that, all of us have different currency of desire. I used to look down on people like in finances or real estate, right? Like, what are you doing about it? You're just making the rich rich. But I realized, my currency of desire is creating impact and doing these, working with patients and clients. I could do Excel sheets all day. I could do sales call all day, but I would hate my life. That's why I left my private sector. Conversely, for someone like one of my best friends, Jonathan Yu, right? Very successful. And he is a servant leader, the truest sense. He cannot do what I do, right? So I realized, it's not about impact or all these external attachment. It's just, what is our currency of desire? And are we going to live that out?
Yeah.
And I think that's it was a point of humility for me, because I put myself away from the impact pedestal and say, I'm just like anyone else. I just happen to choose this path because I can't do the other path.
See, I call that calling, right? And I also put it this way: everything that you need to fulfill. This is how I work. Everything that I need to fulfill the mission that I've been given, the calling that I've been given, is inside of me. And so I say that your passion is kind of like leading you. Everybody says you're called for God's purpose, but I think He's put a passion in you that leads you too. And as a kid, I was getting kicked out of class for fighting for the little guy. As a kid, I was getting kicked out of class for like arguing with the teacher because that's not right. And it was good passion focused in the wrong direction. And so what I feel like is exactly what you're saying, but I feel like I had to follow my passion, my calling, and it 100%. And I don't judge the Osteens. I don't judge, they're doing what they're called to do. And even though I'm looking at their planes and looking at their stuff and making that call, I'm not, at the end of the day, I don't know the nuances of what he does and what he doesn't do. I think too much work with looking at people on screens and judging them like they're not people. And so I try to look at everybody like he's doing his calling.
Well, Joel Osteen better invite you to speak at his church.
I think it costs money to speak at his church. There are some things that are just like...
after your gracious message. Yeah. But speaking of calling and wellness, speaking of my calling, I'm especially passionate about highlighting and spotlighting the crucial component of mental health and emotional health for men. Right? Because through social and cultural narratives, with minorities or white, doesn't matter, for all men, we're only taught that two emotions are allowed. anger and happy. That's it. No other emotions are allowed. And this outdated cultural blueprint of endless suppression, whatever this manly man looks like, right? So I want to go back to you, Pastor Bobby. What does being a healthy leader and pastor mean to you in this overly saturated wellness and spiritual space? Air quote.
Yeah. So a healthy leader is being emotionally healthy and spiritual healthy. In other words, for me, I think a lot of times in a spiritual context, we focus only on we need to pray. You need to pray more. You need to pray more. And the mystical. But there's a emotional side of it too. Could you imagine if Jesus was emotionally unhealthy, and and how he would respond to certain people? He did respond to people in a healthy way, but I think that's a product of his emotional health, and he responded correctly to the situation. Right? I think that for me, being a good spiritual leader is also being a good emotional health leader, and also because I'm going to produce who I am. My people are going to look at me and say, they're going to feed off me. The organization, I think, is going to look like me. If I'm unhealthy, it's going to be unhealthy. If I'm unhealthy, the people I help develop are going to become unhealthy. And so you always produce who you are, not what you teach as much as, In that sense, my first job is to always find that space. And the great thing is I really enjoy that. My job is to be the most healthiest, to be the most healthiest that I can be. Right. So part of my job is making sure I take the Sabbath, making sure I see my therapist, and everything else I need to do to stay emotionally healthy in order to stay spiritually healthy, especially coming from the context that I came from, the trauma. I feel like my trauma is a blessing. I feel like my past is a blessing because I had to work my way out of that. And in working my way out of that, I kind of learned the path, at least for me, that I can help others to learn that path too.
Yeah, a metaphor just came up in my mind where you can think about nicest cars with the best interior and exterior designs. Name any supercars like Mercedes, Ferrari. If their engines are not lubricated and old and rusty, you can have the best specs. The car's not going to run. And emotional health is a drive. I preach that all the time. So I echo that very deeply.
Thank you. I see that in churches a lot, where the churches focus so much on the spiritual, mystical aspect that there's no emotional health and the people are miserable. I just don't think that the whole Jesus as our God died on the cross in order to make us all miserable. I think there's an aspect of where we have to suffer a little bit in order to fulfill our calling and mission that he's given us as an individual. But I also think there's a way. He wanted us to do that in a healthy way. I just think we're focused once again on big and more, not on healthy nowadays, even in the church, even as a leader. I want to be a better leader. And then that to them, and a lot of people, when they hear that, they think about reaching more people, bigger platforms. But when I say better leader, I want to actually be a healthy leader that helps other people become who they're called to be and as healthy as they're called to be.
So you're saying that when someone's struggling with loss and grief or cancer, you're saying, hey, pray harder is not going to help?
Not at all.
Your faith must not be strong enough. How do you quantify and measure someone's faith?
I don't even think that's how Jesus answered, It was just it's one of those things where people do that. It's a detriment, it's a detriment to what their actual mission is trying to do. So many things we do in the religious sector are a detriment to our actual mission. And that's one of those things where you're not talking to them as a person, you're talking to them as a format that you've laid out. Pray, but you're not hearing them and you're not speaking to them. You're just speaking at them, and which is one of the biggest dangers in church at all. And it turns people away. I've been in front of a lot of deathbeds, a lot of kids who just lost their 14-year-old girl, her boyfriend had just gotten shot and killed, and we drove up the next day to see him, and pray harder would not have been. I even brought my leaders because I said, you have to watch her face, see how she is, make sure. And they said, well, what do we say? I said, you say nothing. You just be present.
There's nothing you can say that's going to help.
And isn't that what Jesus did more than anything? His presence was the most powerful. He came to earth. He was present with us. So I think that's really our calling, is to be present with those people who are suffering.
Yeah, what you said reminds me of what I shared, I think, earlier this year, where I think about logic a lot. I think a lot of men, we pride ourselves, of course women too, but especially men as a stereotype, our men needs to be hyper-logical, rational, right? And it's like this logos, the logic. It's like a big identity that a lot of men wear, especially for high achievers, right? Things like that. But then my question is, let's say, for example, you're speaking or dealing with loss and grief of one of your congregation. or let's say you're trying to get closer with your intimate relationship with your partner and spouses. When we think about being logical, it's not doing what we think is logical based on our preferences. What is truly logical is based on the circumstances, doing what is best and most conducive for the outcome that's mutually beneficial. So if women and their spouses, when they're meant to seek therapy and open up about their feelings, take off their trauma armor, oh, I want to be logical. No, emotion is going to slow me down. That's not logical. That's just called bias. What's logical is, oh, my spouse cares about me opening up and being more intimate with them. My spouse cares about me seeking help professionally because they've seen me in misery or suffering. That's the logical thing to do because the most optimal outcome is doing that. But when you only navigate based on your internal desire, that's not logic. It's just desire.
I mean, I think we call logic what's actually cultural, right? Like we call it logic because we want to make it sound all, we want to justify it, But yeah, it's definitely a cultural thing, where we're not allowed to express our feelings, our emotion, especially when, you spoke about mental health in the urban context and especially seeking therapy. The men down there, we are not allowed, we have to be strong because it's life or death. You're living in what can be compared to a war zone. We just had somebody murdered in one of our areas last night. And I had to call all my leaders and say, are you okay? There's this aspect of like in that thing where you have to be strong and you can't fake it. And culturally, they're actually doing more damage by being what they would call logical because they're saying, I don't need help, and I got to be strong, but they're actually weakening themselves. And I think that's amazing to me. Don't look strong, be strong. Go get the therapy so you'll actually be strong. And that's the difference. I think it's looking versus actually doing, like you said. You'd be surprised how many people, and we even say this with kids when they're tend to fight against the schools and everything. Do you want to win or do you want to fight? And we give them that because the feeling of I won from fighting to them is better than actually what it takes to win.
I'm thinking about, since we're both veterans, I feel like we check a lot of the boxes when people view us as this machicho, bravado men, right? But obviously we're more emotionally attuned and we've done a lot of work. I don't think it takes courage for soldiers to go to battlefields putting on the armor. That's obvious. Duh. That's survival. It's out of necessity. What is courageous is what you said, when you come back from the battlefields, literally or metaphorically, your ability and your courageousness to take off the trauma armor, dealing with this potential lack of emotional safety. Putting on the armor in the battlefield is a must, but taking off the armor after the battlefields, that's a choice.
Yeah.
And I think choice demands courage. And I sense that from what you said.
Yeah, individual courage, right? Because you're by yourself. It's a lot easier to put on the armor when everybody around you is. It's hard to be sitting in that room contemplating killing yourself or contemplating whatever you're contemplating or struggling and saying, as an individual, I have to make the decision. But I consider the military one giant peer pressure pot.
Everybody's moving in a direction. You don't want to be the guy that raises your head and says. And so because of that, I feel like it's easier, like you said, to put on your armor and go out there and finish the mission. I wouldn't take away from it and say that it's not, but I would just say that it's a lot harder sitting maybe in your room and deciding, I've got to be this vulnerable person. I've got to call. People don't want to deal with those issues. Those are some ugly things that they have to talk about. And it's really takes a lot of courage, like you said, to handle that.
Just to clarify, so I don't get attacked by the veteran community. I'm not saying that being a soldier requires no courage, since we both are veterans. I'm saying that it takes more courage to let go of the calluses, let go of the patterns that made you feel safe.
Would you say emotional courage versus physical courage? Yeah.
Yeah, because unlearning and deconditioning is a lot harder and requires tremendous effort than learning and conditioning. Because conditioning is effortless because it's done to you. Deconditioning is a choice. Requires great effort.
Well, we went through 3 months of boot camp to learn how to go that way.
Yep.
No one put us through a boot camp. And this is why I struggle with the military. They spend 3 months, they spend all these time training us and building us to go into the military, to do what we're doing. But when it's time to get out, the time is a week at our class.
Good luck.
Yeah. And there's no, how do I come back into society? How do I deal with these things? There's not a lot. The veterans, VA does its best, but to some extent, it still depends on the individual to go and get help.
I have a question I think ties into everything we talked about. You said also in the La Raza documentary that someone asked you, how do you describe trauma on the street life? And you said people call it life. So how do you then go from a place of unhealthy norm to a new place of hope and possibilities?
My journey was to get to the bottom where I had just played it all out. And I had made all the decisions wrong based off my training and growing up in the neighborhood. It was not working for me anymore. It wasn't getting me to where I truly wanted to be deep down in my heart. And so I had a choice. I either continue to go down this path, which I knew it was going to end in death. There was even a point where I wanted to take my own life, or I try something different. And I literally just said, that's it. I'm going to try something different. I've never tried my faith in God. And that was my thing, my faith in God. And when I started to do that, and that was scary because it was so different, I had so much judgment against Christians. So I was moving in a space that was scary, but I had no choice. So a lot of us won't change till we hit the rock bottom. But I've seen kids change, and usually it has to do with relationship. So when I'm working with kids, the change that happens to be is a powerful relationship that comes alongside them and walks with them out of that space, and is willing to put up with. Because let me tell you something, working with these kids is not the warm and fuzzy feeling. They will flip on you, yell at you, blame you, do everything, and you have to be able to take that pain enough while you're working with them, and the disappointment and the hurt. Thank God I grew up in it enough so I understand it, to be able to continue walking with them. And then one day, you just see it. It's just a little flash of it's there, where they're all of a sudden they're walking, making right decisions, or they're opening up to you in a different way, and you're like, wow, we're getting there. But then that goes quiet, and you have to wait even longer again. So yeah,
You're speaking about seed planting, right? Planting seeds. I have a question in that sense, where one of my biggest learning edge this year clinically is about ownership. Because I used to pride myself for feeling ownership over the wellness and recovery of my patients and clients. But I realized if I take ownership of their successes, I also take ownership of their failures and regressions and stepbacks. And I realized that's more self-centered. I'm taking the spotlight away from the clients, their self-determinism, their own desires, their goals. Because our goals are not their goals. Right. Doesn't matter how well-intended we are. How do you view the ownership? Because you just said it. Sure, you're planting the seed. Sometimes you see the seeds blossom and it is amazing. That gives you fuel to do this for another year, another 2 years. But then based on how you place your ownership and how you feel about that and where your ego lies in that process, it could be very detrimental, not just your mental health, but also the relationships.
So 100% your mental health is an issue, right? Because then you feel like all these kids, you're watching them on their Instagram and they're smoking weed after you just had a great conversation. You're like, oh, great. You know what? I realized it was when we had a little girl who took her own life, and she was really close to us. And I had to kind of go through the whole process. And in the process, what happened was, in my faith, I realized as I was studying the Bible that God gave us, one of the first things he ever gave us was the right to choose what we were going to do with our life. And if he gave somebody that, it was precious. I couldn't take it away. And so I was just agreeing with him that they had the right to choose. And so I just came to this point where in this case, this little girl chose to take her life. And whether I agree with it or disagree, and no matter how much it hurts me, that was her choice. And yeah, there's a sense of empowerment too, right? With the kid who wins. When they win, that's their win. You cannot take anything from it. You can expect it all, but they're not going to do a speech about how great you are. I think everybody thinks that they see the movies with Michelle Pfeiffer, these old movies where the teacher and everybody talks about it. Doesn't work like that. They're proud of themselves because they know the struggles that you weren't even there for. And I consider myself just a piece of their help, but I consider them in the fight. And one of the ways I describe it is they're in a fight in the ring and I'm the coach yelling. I'm one of the coaches yelling. But they have to take all the hits. They have to win the fight. So at the end, it's their victory. And at the end, it's also their loss. My mom is the one who put that in my brain. I remember now, I used to wake up for school. I wouldn't go. I ditched school. One day she looked at me. She goes, if you don't go to school, it's going to hurt me. But I guarantee it's going to hurt you more. And she said, so you have to live with that decision. And after 2 years of hearing that, I finally started going to school.
Only 2 years? That could have been worse.
I think it was the last month of school. Something like that.
Finished the year strong. Yeah, I resonate with that a lot because I do feel like if we're taking over the ownership of others, it's really hard for everyone involved, right? And I really resonate with suicide because that's one of my specialties, suicide prevention. As a veteran, I work a lot with suicidal clients, with suicidal ideations. I think I'm one of the few therapists who I'm very explicit with suicide. I often have conversations with my suicidal clients that, hey, if you take the route of taking your own life because of this insufferable suffering you're going through, it's going to destroy me. It's going to be very tough. But who am I to impose my moral values on you? Your life is your life. If I'm in your shoes with the exact same circumstances, I'll probably make the same decisions. But often when I learn this suicidal ideations, it's an act of far cry, right? Because they don't feel heard, they don't feel seen, they don't feel accepted and loved. Those are the 4 core ingredients for any human needs.
Yeah.
It's been proven. So at least with a lot of my suicidal clients, they just want to be heard. And when you share that, hey, I hear you, you're suffering, I'm here with you, and I empathize with your suffering, and you may take the route that's going to be very sad, but ultimately it is your life and your choices, and it's not me who get to dictate or influence your decisions. All I can say is hold space and share what I'm thinking in a very non-judgmental way.
See, I think what's powerful in that, because I come that route too. First off, no one's going to make a decision like that because you told them not to. Mm-hmm. It's just not going to work. No matter how logical your argument is, they're not listening to that. Mm-hmm. So it's a useless fight. Mm-hmm. But to empower them, to connect with them and then empower them, I think to make the decision, you give them, there's a better chance of influencing them to the right way. And so I'd rather take that better chance, right? Because sitting there, I've never been able to argue anybody to change their life in any way. If anything, I've made them want to more stick in their stance, right? You know, that's what they say. Yeah, so definitely, I'm in the same boat. Because a lot of our kids struggle with that. I know I did. I actually had got to the point where I was sitting there with a shotgun in my mouth trying to figure out at one point in my life. And all of our kids struggle with that idea. What they usually tell me is, not that I want to kill myself, I just don't want to be here, mm-hmm. which is like the start of that. Or they just say, hey, I feel I've had some attempts and I've been in the hospital and I've had to go into the hospital at those times. Yeah, it's pretty much the normal of our environment. That the suicidal thoughts are normal for where we're at. I don't know about any other context. Mm-hmm. I know my context, and we're just always talking them through that. But I've had to empower them. That what I found is that works. Empowering them and then loving them because they just feel so lonely. And love breaks through the loneliness.
Yeah, I used to get really caught up in doing all these like fancy evidence-based interventions with my clients and patients. But I realized the biggest magic, if there's honesty, is just presence, which is a recurring keyword of this entire conversation, right? Just being there, occupying the same space, because I am the only constant for a lot of my patients. I'm the only person sees them every week. I'm the only person that will pick up their calls. I am their constant. Yeah. But hopefully it's for a season, not for life, right? I will just want to be there for their season when they need me the most, and I will be their constant for however long they need it. But I think about that a lot, where I think we tend to judge others for their decisions without context
of what they're going through, right? I can't afford to do that because the minute I judge a kid without their context, they feel it and they'll pull away. And every kid matters, right? So I'm working in juvenile hall. Kids will tell me that they did the most egregious things, and I cannot show them at all. I always say it's not about just not showing them your face or like your judgment face. It's about not judging them because I don't understand their context. I don't know what they grew up in, why they felt the need to do what they did. And so I've learned that that's one of the key things. Yeah. But I heard you say that before on your other podcast where you said, it's only for a season that you're with them. Part of me shrieked like, oh no, because I know with even my therapist, I'm like long-term.
Like, you're not letting go.
Not at all. Like,
not ready yet.
He's not going anywhere. You know, like, I'm moving to Nebraska. So are we. But what it is though, is what I've understood was that there's a power in that as a leader, as leading somebody, because it's not about you. And because you don't feel like you're the answer for their life, you're preparing them for life without you. And when you said that, I was kind of shrieked back, but then I thought that's amazing that you think like that.
Well, just like parents are just children who grew older for having children for the first time. That's parents, right? And I have a lot of mentees. Josh is one of them. And my intention with all my mentees is I want to get to a point where they no longer put me on a pedestal or look up to me, but on an equal grounds. Even for them to surpass me. Yeah. And I think we need to do that with our parents too. Like parents, they tried their best raising us, but they're not this perfect, invincible, awesome. I know your stories are a little bit different.
I'm like, how about your parents?
My parents, your parents are a little bit different. It's really important because unless you take them off a pedestal, could be anyone, your parents, a speaker, a thinker you look up to, etc., pastors, whatever. Unless you take them off the pedestal, you're not going to be able to have this equal relationship. And there's always this innate invisible power dynamic at play. Always. Unless you're being very cognizant. You have that with your congregations and the youth you reach out to. Even if you're humble about it, there is this power dynamic. Yeah. I have that with my clients and patients, right? So I think about that a lot, where I can't wait to be on the same level as my mentees who are now my peers. And maybe even I can respect them and learn something. Because otherwise, what's the point of me just creating Benoit 2.0?
Yeah.
I don't need that.
Yeah. I consider that, to be honest with you, one of the most, this is in my context, sins. You're trying to, God has made this person, destined them, and divinely created them how he wants to do what he's called them to do. For me to take them away from that is probably like one of the biggest, we're marching against a lot of things that but the biggest thing is allowing people to be who God's created them to be in order to fulfill the mission that he's created for them, their calling and their desire. I tend to look at the Bible a little different, I guess, in this context where it's not about doing a bunch of good things. That's important, but that's like the baseline. But it's also about fulfilling the mission that he's put in your heart. Because if you look throughout the whole thing, it's just a bunch of people who did the mission that they were called to do. So if I take away from that, I don't want to be that guy. I feel like I have to answer for that one day, so I'm careful with that.
And I think based on like your self-awareness and just your maturity, emotional maturity, things like that, I think the more youth and others without proper context and intention, the more they internalize other people's feedback. I think it silences their own voices.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's obvious. I think that takes years to unfold. But then that's the thing. The more you let go of your authentic self, the way we started this conversation, the more you conform. Sure, for a season, you might have to conform, like the example I gave earlier. But unless you really go back to your inner self, your authentic self, the amount of deconditioning and the amount of therapy that's going to require once you become an adult. So why not be more intentional since the beginning? But that requires great mentorship who facilitate this growth process rather than trying to instill what I know and trying to just like more for self-gratifying reasons.
Yeah. And that's something that we've had to learn the hard way, right? Like it's not, and that's the thing you said at the very beginning, this is not about me. It's about you. I'm serving you. But church isn't like that. Let's just be honest about it. Most churches in America, you walk in and they want to think about how you can help them, not how I can benefit you. I was telling my wife that the other day, the buildings are getting bigger, right? Why don't they ever create aspects of how helping their own community or helping the people in their community do certain things for them, their emotional health? Why don't they pay for therapy when they, rather than paying for another bigger nursery? The nursery is good enough because that would help their people. But they think of themselves as consistently like being this, I think, business that grows bigger, right? Like I said, where they're not serving their community anymore. They're not caring for them as individuals.
That's actually perfect because like when I hear the word church, I immediately associate with Christianity, communities, pastors, or spiritual health. And maybe even church hurt, because I experience a lot myself. So what does a healthy church actually look like in practice?
Well, see, it's hard because I think we think, like you said, we think of church in the sense of the American mindset of church. I think it looks like a family. I think when you look at, like, maybe it's not like completely replacing a family, but when you look at Jesus in the Bible, he talks about, hey, who's my family? These are my brothers and sisters. There was a reason for that. He didn't just say it. He wasn't just being a jerk to his family. He was saying that I feel like about this person like I would a brother, a healthy brother. And so I think it's knowing, I think it looks like the size it's supposed to be, not the size we want it to be. And so right now Passion has a church aspect of it. It's real small and that's healthy. If we get too big too fast, we'll be unhealthy. We won't be able to have intimate relationships. I think you can do that in a big setting, but I'm not called to figure that out. So I'm okay with where I'm called to be. So a church setting is as the size it needs to be. A healthy church is also treating everybody like family, but in a healthy way. And it's an emotionally healthy church, right? Like the way they respond to each other is their best. And they're all on a journey together, growing. And the pastor is not some hierarchy, like king who makes the decisions. Although, like you said, sometimes I feel that pressure. Look, the good thing with the way I do it is I feel really uncomfortable when people give me that much authority in their life. I don't want to choose anything in your life because then I have to be responsible for that. But yeah, it's that. And it's just empowered people doing great things. A whole community. And I think it changes the community outside of the church building. It's bigger than the building.
So to go a little bit deeper, how would you then redefine church?
I would never consider the building. I would never consider the building the church. I would never consider the business aspect. I would consider the community, the people. As in, it could be a coffee shop where they preach and empower people in the coffee shop. It could be internet personality who does that and has a group of people who listen to them. It's so much bigger than just the building and the organizations we call church. It's anywhere where people meet and are empowered to follow the calling that God has called them to. It's bigger than the building. It's a movement, right? But right now, we're just so stuck in that mode. We're stuck, even though it's not working for us. We're losing 1 million kids a year. 1 million people a year are losing, and we keep trying the same thing and hoping for a new result.
Well, 1 million kids are leaving church a year?
Every year.
Dang.
Yeah. And we're still trying to like do it the same old way because it worked for us back then. It's not working now. We need to change how we do it. We need to drop the model. It's like Blockbuster, right? Let's continue to try it until we have one little church in Alaska, right? Like, no, it's just not working. We need to do it. We have to utilize everything we call evil. Like when I was growing up, Facebook, evilness of Facebook is actually a blessing to us now, but we're like 10 years behind. We need to stop looking at everything as evil and just say, how does God want me to use this to fulfill my mission?
Yeah, that reminds me of my favorite quote that Jim Carrey said. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome, right? And I think Yangnak, my church, struggles with that. Right, it operates based on a lot of outdated models, a lot of hierarchy, a lot of bureaucracy. I'm a deacon in my church, so I could say this, but
I'm not, so I won't say that.
No, but for real though, I do feel like there goes the old with the new, right? And change is the only constant, metaphysically, physically. Like it is literally the only constant. Like the planet we're sitting in right now is literally spinning as we speak.
Yeah.
On an astrological level, like the planet is spinning.
Yeah.
This is not stationary. So on a fundamental level, we have to go with the change. Because as you said, Blockbusters, I mean, there's so many models, right? Toys R Us, same thing. If you don't adapt, you die.
There's that story that the Blockbuster guy had a chance to buy Netflix. Did you hear about that? He had a chance to buy, and he chose not to because he was so stuck in his ways and felt so much mighty. I think that's what the church is at. It feels so strong and mighty that until it feels the pain, really feels the pain, it's not going to start making changes that it needs to make. And by the time that happens, it'll be too late to see the impact that it's supposed to have in this world.
Yeah, no, I love that story because I think Blockbuster, they had a meeting and they said, oh, our subreddit traffic outgrows your traffic for the entire show. And I mean, look at Netflix now and where's Blockbusters, right?
Yeah. Well, Netflix is suffering the same thing though, I think too. I always say the rebel of today will be the establishment of tomorrow. And that's, you have to, like you said, you have to constantly look at yourself and say, is what I'm doing helping me to get where I want to be and do what I want to do in this life? That's why I do. Everybody says, is passion at church? And I always say, it depends. Are we talking about what you think or what I think? Because if it's what I think, yeah, it's definitely a church.
So when you're navigating with your communities, trying to seek out new members or just, like you said, listen and be there and offer the presence that they often lack in their lives, do you have any other like entry points to go in? Because what I mean by that is like when I'm thinking about Netflix, right? Netflix's strategic decision they made to really push with the K-wave, Korean wave, K-drama, for example. K-drama now globally is contributing most of their profit for Netflix.
Yeah.
They only expected Korean population to respond to it, but they underestimate the global phenomenon of K-wave. That's what they call it now. K-pop, K-drama culture. So that's the entry point they used. And I think based on the entry points you utilize, you can sometimes maybe compensate or even out the other like suboptimal decisions. So back to you, aside from just listening, being that presence, being that constant for many, do you have any strategic entry points you think about when you're going out with outreach missions or just doing your organizational work?
Like towards the individual or towards the group as a whole?
Either way.
So towards the individual, really just connecting in pain with them, when letting them somehow hear my story without trying to overwhelm them listening. If they hear my story, then they feel like more, and my openness and honesty, they'll feel more open and honest and we'll be able to connect. As a group, my group, it's hard because there's so many entry points with this generation to reach in. We know that internet works. We tried during COVID, we did TikTok. We were able to reach a lot of our group, the group that we're trying to connect with. There's so many different ways to be able to do that. I think right now our biggest way is though, like we go to where they would probably, I always say, where's the group that we're looking for? Where are they massing at? Where's a big group of them? So like we're looking for kids who are going through struggles, who are alone, who need help and support that we can offer, whether they come First off, we're never looking for members. We're always looking to empower people. If they become a member, that's a blessing. But if not, we're not worried about it. But the people we want to bless are in the juvenile halls. They're in the foster communities. They're at school, but they're not we always say they're not the valedictorian.
They're the truants.
Yeah. So we're always like hanging out, trying to figure out how we can connect with those kids in that group. And so there's just the tons of entry points that we can find with them.
Yeah, I wasn't hinting at social media, but I just think about like technological front ends. And I saw your TikTok page, right? I know you guys did spend a lot of effort, maybe the last 2 years or so, I think, if the timeline serves right. And it's the same thing going back to what you said, like when you judge something or label something as evil, what's the context? Does it serve a purpose? Like social media is one of the main contributing factors for the rapid rise of superficial relationships. That's a fact.
Yeah.
Right? Teenager girls, adolescent girls, they have one of the highest suicide rate in America because of unrealistic beauty standards, the dopamine withdrawal, hijacking, all these things. So yes, it has evil components, sure. But can you utilize it and wield it to your advantage for greater purposes? And I sense that with what you say, entry points, either going for these marginalized and neglected communities or utilizing TikTok, which your kids live and breathe by.
2 a.m. when they feel like they're the lowest point, that's the only way we can get to them. And that's why I love it. It's effective. Everybody was telling me that it was evil. They made fun of us. They were like, oh, look at Bobby's 40 years old on TikTok. I felt ridiculous, but I had to go through that because the mission was more important than my feelings. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I had seen Facebook come through and everybody said it was evil and now they're using it. Instagram came through, everybody said it was evil and ridiculous and now they're using it. So I was like, look, let's just jump on these new technologies to be able to have access to the people we want to reach and empower.
So let's continue to go down the empowerment track. So as I said earlier, as a forensic clinician who work in a forensic setting, it just means core mandated. I work with my patients and clients who are struggling with severe mental illness like schizophrenia or severe addiction. Through my work, I realized, and I saw this in real life, and research shows this, support this as well. Everyone, and I mean everyone, is truly 1 degree or 1 misstep away from entirely different life projections, right? Through God's blessing, through grace of Marine Corps, you didn't pull the trigger with your shotgun, things like that, right? So there's a lot of these gracious moments, we call it grace. We don't know why it happened to us. Why are we the ones who survived our suicidal ideations? Why are we here having this conversation? There are many people out there who are better than me, better than you, right? So I really think it's important to be humble and to recognize that all of us are constantly 1 degree and 1 decision away from a very different life outcome. Any thoughts there through your grace story through the U.S. Marine Corps?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just not even the Marine Corps. It's just life. Where there were so many times where I shouldn't be here, so many moments. And every one of these guys from the neighborhood, Checha talks about the guy that was murdered at his doorstep. He could have been out on that doorstep.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many times bullets went around you and didn't hit you. So many times I made mistakes or even overdosed, as a kid, and all these things where I shouldn't be here. And I feel like, because I'm a person who connects everything to purpose, I feel like everything has its purpose, right? So the people who didn't make it, the way I kind of keep peace with that, because there's always the survivor guilt when you come out of the neighborhood, that was that their end brings purpose. And that it's just their time to go. But there's this, you have to figure out a way to make sense of the craziness of why I made it out, why this person isn't there. It would have been so much better if my real father was here. But the way you just say, hey, there's a purpose, and you find the purpose in that. And it's hard sometimes because you have to really look and things that don't make sense when young people die. And then at that point, that's why my faith is keeps me going. I just give it up and say, I can't find the purpose, but I'm sure when this is over, I can see from a better view and I can see the purpose in that. So, yeah.
I don't think it's our job to try to conceptualize God's decisions. If we could conceptualize God and his decisions, he ceased to be God. If we can understand this higher being, why would he be higher being, right?
Have you seen that Bruce Almighty where he becomes God? I always think of that. Oh my gosh, I would mess it up so bad.
Split the cars?
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking of the monkey part, but yeah. No, exactly, 100% like that. If I was God and I was making choices, I think I would just mess everything up and this world would be way worse. So I guess that's my saving grace. That's what gets me through the hard times.
Yeah. Also, what you said reminds me of a passage I read from a book earlier called Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I'm a big subscriber to Stoic philosophy, and Stoicism is not this emotionless false bravado. That's false. If you actually study Stoicism, it's very emotionally attuned. Marcus Aurelius, of course, is the last greatest Roman Empire, great thinker. His son ruined everything, but he's dead by that point. In the book, he talks about everything that happens in this world is prescribed by nature because they're natural. What that means is if something happened that's not dictated by supernatural or paranormal force, it is literally by definition nature.
Yeah.
So whether it's tragedy, sadness, unfortunate situations that happen to you, they're literally natural. They're prescribed by nature to happen. Similarly, if a doctor prescribes you medication for a stomach ache, you take that medication because it's been prescribed to you. So unless things are not supernatural, they are natural. So he says, accept that and do something about it. Because I deal with a lot of coworkers and friends who deal with white guilt. They feel really bad and they mean well. And of course, with create a relationship, I say, you crying and feeling guilty and losing sleep over white guilt, what is that going to do? Do something about it if you really feel guilty about it. But don't cry and not do anything, because doing nothing is also a form of injustice.
Yeah, I don't understand white guilt because my context is so on the other side of it. But yeah, I get what you're saying. And that's what we tell the kids too. You can sit here and you can mope in all your pain, or it's fuel. It can either burn you up or you can use it to move you forward. It's just how you process it and how you use it. So we're constantly telling the kids, because we have kids who have gone through some really bad things. And obviously the relationship equity is there before we say those things and everything. But we always tell them, like, this thing will consume you. And I've seen people, and we've seen people, and they've seen them in the neighborhood who are like 80 years old and still talking about that one moment, still stuck in that pain. And I'm like, come on, they're great examples of what, to me, their life is a purpose too. They're great examples of the way you don't want to live, unfortunately. Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, I think if you want like premium growth and paying teachers, that's another thing we've been alluding to. I think you have to pay premium for the price. If you have a nice car, you have to pay premium for the gas. If you put regular, it's going to ruin your car. So I like to see the suffering we go through. It's a lot of like the core principles. Buddhism talks about suffering is part of life. That's their first truth. Christianity talks about that, right? Jesus is the embodiment of ultimate suffering.
Yeah.
And think about where that got us, redemption. And I think we need to accept that suffering is part of life, but also maybe recognize our responsibility in that, because that to me is empowering, because we can do something about it.
No, it is. I think that, like you said before, we try to avoid pain in anything we do, and we don't move towards pleasure, right? I think that we are become experts at that, in the neighborhood, because you're dealing with so much pain. Your 12-year-old friend just got shot. Your mom's, abusive towards you, and your dad has a whole nother family, and we're dealing with all this stuff that we just become really at a very young age. Masters of avoiding pain, and we get stuck. And that's what the use of drugs is and everything like that too. But when you accept that life is full of suffering, and you might as well suffer for something you want rather than just suffer for no reason, then that's when I think it empowers you to just go out there and get what you feel is you're in your destiny or calling or whatever you want to call it.
Like a lot of my male clients, they're first-time therapy seekers, and they're like, "Oh man, this is gonna suck. I don't want to talk about my feelings." Like, oh, dude, like, what are you going to do? Fix my life? And so whatever questions or skepticism that first-time therapy seekers ask, men or women, I always say, yes, seeking therapy and trusting your life stories with a stranger who's professionally trained, that might sound painful and scary, and it might sound hard, but not doing and not seeking help is harder. Your misery every day is harder. Your depressive thoughts are harder. Your lack of motivations and feeling lost in life, that's harder. So what's the effort and the vehicle you want to choose? Being afraid of not doing anything because it's hard, or doing something despite it is hard for the prospect of possibilities and hope?
Pain with a purpose, right? Yeah, that's what I always say. Pain with a purpose. But people get stuck in their modes. They're so used to the misery, it's actually scary to be without it.
Yep.
The first thing I told my therapist was, I'm afraid to get healthy. He said, why? I said, because I've never lived in that area. I don't know what it's like to be there. And what if I lose my passion? What if I change my life? What if I, in a way that's so new, different? It was so scary to get healthy. And what you're saying is exactly what I had to deal with. But it was so scary to keep going where I was going. I was destroying my family. I was destroying everything, even as a pastor, I was losing it. And I just had to make the choice to go seek therapy. I remember, because I had gone through a divorce in the past when I was younger. Now, after the Marine Corps, when you get in the Marine Corps, they say, don't marry anybody or get a car. Well, I got the car and got married right away. So I tried to do everything.
You're a star student.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And so I did everything wrong, got the divorce and everything. And I remember that pain. And that pain, I was like, I never want to feel this again. So when I got remarried and I started pushing us down that path, I was like, I want to avoid that pain more than anything else. So I went and I spoke about all the things I was going through. And all of a sudden things started, I didn't notice I was changing. My wife, I said, I'm not going to go to therapy anymore. I think I'm good. She said, oh, no, you're going to therapy. She said, we'll figure that out, but you're going to therapy. Yeah. Because she says, the way you're reacting to me, the things you're trying are so important. I need that. So, and I said, this is my agreement. I'll keep going if you go. And then she went and her life started. Now therapy within Passion LA is mandated. All of our leaders are mandated therapy, and we pay for it in Passion. That's part of our biggest thing, because we want to make sure that they're healthy leaders that are developing healthy leaders. And so that was one of the biggest things that people, even in other organizations, were like, that's amazing that you do that. And yeah, we're never going to pull away from that. If we pull away from that, we will lose who we are.
Yeah, I think we all have a choice, except happy wife, happy life. Trump's that choice. No, but I think that's a joke. But I think the better saying is happy house, happy life, because it's a collective contribution. It's not just one spouse or the other. It's not just like gender equality, right? Just house requires teamwork. Just like your organization and family requires different pillars. You're not the only pillar. There's not a single house with one pillar.
Yeah.
That falls apart, literally. Right. And I think it's really important to do the hard thing, do the things that make you proud of your decisions, because that translates to happiness. But doing the hard thing with the people you believe in, that's pretty awesome.
We stay away from like happiness because of the idea that these kids have to go through a lot of, and we've never really known that, like complete happiness. And they think of happiness as smiling all the time and always good feelings. So what we tell them is healthiness. Like, we always stick with the word healthy. We want you to get you to where you have a healthy life, because we want them to acknowledge, because if we tell them they're going to be happy and they get to a point of unhappiness, they'll feel like something's wrong. But we all know that in that healthiness, there's a point where you'll be not happy all the time, or you won't experience that joy all the time. We even tell them that that victory doesn't feel like the guy on top of the hill, but it feels like suffering. It feels like struggle. And then there's that moment where you feel like that. But so we try to prepare them for that, because if they don't feel like it's going the right way, they'll stop and pull back to what they always known, which is miserableness.
Healthiness like that. And also, like, depression is not a single state, right? As a clinician, like, depression is a clusters of symptoms. Apathy, sadness, lack of motivation, hopelessness, it's clusters. Happiness is not a single state. It's also clusters. Right. So I agree that like just this facade or presentation of smiling is not happiness, because I love Bill Burr. He's one of my favorite comedians, along with Conan O'Brien. And Bill Burr and a lot of great comedians, they said that I cannot seek therapy because my edge as a comedian is my trauma. That's what you alluded to, right? But if you look at Bill Burr, he's getting funnier after he sought out, because if you have the talent and the X factor, you have it. Getting healthier is not going to take away your advantage. That's not true.
And that's one of the keys to leadership that they don't talk about. If you become a healthy leader, the growth is automatic. And so they're like, how do I become, and when you stop focusing on trying to be big and you just become healthy, you'll see the growth that you've been trying so hard to get that's been eluding you. That's the key to leadership. You hear all these leadership gurus now, and they talk about, this is how you say this, you just go on the grind, Gary Vee. I love them. I listen to all those kind of guys. But what no one talks about is how much healthiness has to do with the impact of your leadership capacities and capabilities. So I was afraid of that, but passion has moved to a whole different level when I became healthy. Yeah, I'm not as I'm still as charismatic, I guess that's what they say, but I'm not as emotional on the stage. But I also realized that the stage is only one part of leadership. I also was able to pull back and articulate information better. And so there was so much more benefits of being that healthy person, exactly what you said. And we've seen Passion LA become way more healthy. In fact, this year we're expanding to 3 more areas. And where we were only in one when I first started this journey of health.
Well, after this interview, it'd be 4 different places. And a guest preaching gig at Joel Osteen's church.
Definitely not.
So let's go into your impact and your service, right? So you also serve on the superintendent's faith advisory for Los Angeles United School District, which is one of the biggest school districts in the country. I think it's 15 million or 1.5 million, because LA is not 15 million, but it's at 1.5 million students, which is a lot. And also the steering committee for the Peace Committee of Lincoln Heights in LA. Of course, Lincoln Heights is more urban. There's a lot of populations that struggle. What has working with these communities taught you about faith and life? If you can pull out some maybe universal themes, some patterns and threads you've seen over and over again. Yeah. And feel free to take this where you see fit.
It was actually a different community that taught me to work with all those communities. It was Youngnak, the Korean church that I worked at. I was hired at the Korean church. It was one of the biggest Korean churches. It was one of the biggest Korean churches in America. In that aspect, I was like, I learned how to deal with different cultures and different groups. And because I was the different guy, and I learned so much about like pausing and listening to and understanding more before I make assumptions, because I so many things that were like common sense to me were not common. And I was finding that out in that context, right? So being in that church, I've learned, it made me question everything. So now I always, when I'm working with somebody, I'm like, well, what's their context? And I'm trying to understand them more. So I've had to learn to be slow to judge, obviously, and everything, and to think about the person speaking and where they're coming from, and to learn that not everybody is out to get me, because that's something I learned in the hood. And it's not just about me, that everybody has their mission, and it might not be my mission. I'm not here to get them in mission with me. I'm here to we ultimately have the goal of what's good for the city, and I'm here to do mine. I've also learned, though, there's some dealing in politics, and it's just really bad. It's a really ugly feeling that I really kind of, in a weird way, even though I talk a lot about how politics is so horrible in America, I look up to them in a sense that they were able to move past those feelings of, because there's just this ugliness of like this like superficialness that I don't like to deal with, and these moves that they're making, strategic and everything. I've really felt that people want to do good, but I think that there's so much pulling them away from that. And that's the universal thing, that I think that people want to do good. They really do. They want to see their community better. They just found their niche to do it, and then sometimes they're pulled away from what really. And my job is just to be understanding and let them be on their journey.
You're like alluding to like distractions, right? I'm just keep going back to your processes, because I think there's a lot to be said. But like I said, aside from being purposeful with your mission, your micro approach, this common humanity approach that you use and your team use, how do you and your team, especially your wife or your leadership team, how do you guys fend off and be very mindful and thoughtful about different distractions, not just opportunities, but just noises? Because I know you guys said that if you guys can do this in LA, you guys can do this in the world. I see some truth in that. At the same time, LA is a city with probably one of the craziest noises and distractions there is.
Well, I guess what we mean in that is, what we really mean in that is that our population is everywhere. Or the population we're working with, young, at-risk youth, urban, is everywhere. Because the urban is the currency of the world, right? Like everybody understands that. So that's what we mean by that. As far as you were saying again, like
what do you guys do as a team to like be thoughtful about different distractions and noises?
We take a lot of breaks. We're working in a really struggling area. So our breaks sometimes eluded. So one Monday, so what I did was this. I bought everybody Knott's Berry Farm passes for the year. It was a cheap $150. Then I added the food, $200. So for $250, we could all go as a group. So every once in a great while, I'll just have us take a break. I have us take 2 weeks off. It's not what you think, because it's not, that time is so, it gets to you so much that you can get in that mode where you're just doing what you need to do and falling into a path away from where you're supposed to be. And because of that, in order to keep us focused, I have to give us breaks. So I'm really big on, so we have a certain amount of breaks. I think we take 3 weeks during this time to just do whatever they need to do. 2 weeks during the graduation time where they're just chilling out, or actually right after graduation, because that's a heavy point. So there's just certain key points where we take the breaks and we're just chilling. And then when we come back, we meet and discuss how are we going to attack the next couple of months. And by then we're refreshed and ready to go. It's almost like a reset every 3 months.
I'm just going to fact check, like, does he actually take those breaks? Okay. I'm just fact checking with your team.
I have a lot of people who are worried about me that are always telling me that I need to take the breaks.
Because one of your biggest intentions during your departure ceremony at Youngnak a while back, what is that, 6 months ago? You said one of your biggest intention is to take break because you haven't had vacation up until that point, I believe. So I just want to follow through because I remember everything you said. So I'm just holding you accountable.
So my wife says I can break my body, but it's my head. Like I'm still thinking of work all the time. So that's the thing. She's 100% right. I am taking a break, but I'm not taking. So my team has now learned the point where they tell me, we can't talk about work. We're just hanging out, Pastor Buffy. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Also, like research shows that cognitively, it takes 2 weeks, 14 days for this thing called de-stressing.
Wow.
It takes a week to get out of your patterns of thoughts and behaviors and processes, and takes another week to reset. So that's why 1 week vacation does not work. It's been proven it does not work. Vacation has to be at least 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because that's when you actually stop the process and this viral loop of go, go, go mode and cognitively slow down and reset. Like this is the first in-person interview I did in a month, more than a month actually. I do virtual interviews, but for the in-person one, this is first time in a month. And I think about, oh man, like, am I rusty? I took 2 weeks off for the vacation. I came out with better questions, more attunement, and better ability to facilitate. But it's that fear of unknown, right? Like when you take off the trauma armor, you're afraid of, oh, what does this look like? When I'm leaving my paradigm into the new one, oof, because humans love certainties. That's our genetic wiring, right? So I think about that a lot where I wish so many people can just sit with the fear, acknowledge it, process it, do not suppress it, do not escape from it if it's safe and appropriate, and then see what's possible on the other side. Because I think fear points to me is synonymous with like growth points.
So we used to ride bikes when I was a kid, and they'd always do the jumps. And there was a certain, when you were about to land, you have to lean forward. But your instinct is to pull back. So I always say you have to go against the instinct because it's the thing that's better for you. So when I take a break, I'm going against my instinct because I'm thinking I'm going to be so much less effective. But in the end, it's way more better because I come back with new thoughts, back in tune, back ready to go 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever had shower thoughts when you're in a go, go, go mode?
What?
Have you ever had like light bulb moments when you're in the go, go, go mode?
No, not really. Actually, to some extent, because I'm always thinking, so I practice this thing. My wife says I can work in my sleep. So I'll think of a problem in my sleep and when I wake up. So I'm actually doing work in my sleep. And no, I think it's just, what I'm doing during that time is just kind of reacting and making decisions to get us through. But no, you're right, 100%. I come back with ready to go light bulb moments.
That was a trick question.
Yeah.
And no one has light bulb moments when they're in the
Really?
go, go, go. No, it's because
Because I was going to try to do that. So.
Because a light bulb moment are like the muse, the spark of creativity and inspiration happens when you stop. It's supported by science of flow, all these literature. So yeah, it's you literally have to stop, and then for those moments to happen, because otherwise, like you said, you're reacting. There's a difference between reaction and response. Yeah. Response is a choice. Reaction is necessitated by circumstances, and most of the time we're just reacting. Like, I'm not here to share, but the last 3 weeks for podcast has been crazy. There's a lot of like moving pieces. I lost my video editor of 2 years, going through 2 different hiring processes with different, agreements. And I realized, oh yeah, I've been reacting a lot the last 2 weeks. So now it's time for me to, once I became aware of it, now I can take a pause, slow it down, maybe reassess what's going on, and then respond accordingly. But I think so many of us go towards a reaction because it's fast. Let me address this right now. But you don't think about the opportunity cost of if you wait a day or 2 or 3, you can actually respond better for a more optimal outcome.
Well, we're not taught that, right? I mean, nobody teaches that. Like when you're a kid, you're just told, do this, do it now, and do it fast, you know? And then if you're not, you're going to get yelled at, so the intensity goes up. So so people have to learn that the hard way, I guess. But yeah, no, and see that whole thing of stopping, that's actually the key. So everybody always asks me, how are you developing these leaders from the community? And one of the ways we do it is we provide a lot of that stopping points, like the breaks, and a lot of emotional support so that they can be healthy enough to fight the battles. Because we have young people coming from the community who have that trauma, who are helping other people who have that trauma, and they're all living in that trauma, right? So that those breaks are important. I think that's like to go back to that church thing. I think that's why the church is where it's at. It's just reacting right now. It's not taking breaks. We don't. Every Sunday we're on it. It's game show. Everything's on, and they're not taking the breaks, and they're not taking that time to walk in the presence.
Yeah, I think every helper, especially like in healthcare, are undiagnosed patients. That's why like every therapist needs their own therapist. Like if you're a therapist or a life coach and you don't have your own, space of debriefing and support, you're a hypocrite.
Yeah.
Like, and I love asking like a lot of helpers, teachers, pastors, leaders, therapists. I ask them, how many of you guys like helping people? Everyone raises their hands. I pause and ask, how many of you guys are good at asking for help?
Yeah.
How can you help others if you're not asking help yourself?
Yeah.
That's hypocrisy, right?
Starving baker.
Starving baker.
Yeah. I see that with the police officers a lot in the community. People think that the police are just these really bad guys. And I think they're people who are under a lot of stress and deal with a lot of trauma, where their community and culture doesn't really affirm getting the emotional help and support that they need. So they just end up getting worse and worse and reacting in ways that are very unhealthy. But their environment calls for that, for them.
Yeah, I love watching Cops show. Actually, Cops is one of my favorite shows to watch. But yeah, the mainstream media and social media, they don't show how many police officers, they cry after they shoot because it's, and we sort of talked about this earlier on. The reason why reasoning does not work, when you're in a fight or flight, when your amygdala, which is the executive controlling of our fear center, when that goes offline, you're in this threat, fight or flight or freeze. Reason is the first thing to go.
Yeah.
That's a fact. Because humans are emotional animals. We're not logical. If we're logical animals, then facts and stats would work. We will not be dealing with the injustices. Deep poverty would have been eradicated. Homelessness of 120,000 count in the LA would have been gone. But it doesn't work because we're not logical. We're emotional, right? So we really have to, like, once again, goes back to emotional health. And once again, the context, it's not, we're just using cops as an example.
Yeah.
But anyone in their positions with the same circumstances will make the exact same decision.
I always say that we grow up we're constantly in the fight or flight because we walk to school and there's, there's always the threat of death over you. You're even living in your house, sleeping in your bed, and somebody can come shooting through. You're constantly aware that death is at your door, especially because you've had friends murdered, family murdered. And so we're constantly, the harder part is to get them out of that in order for them to start responding in healthy ways and making those decisions where it's not the immediate decisions. One of the things we do is our ACEs right away. And we've noticed that like a lot
Adverse child experience.
Yes, 100%. And when we do that, a lot of us notice that. And when we're studying that, we're understanding more that a lot of our decisions are made off this immediate need because we don't see that far in the future, because we're not responding. We're just stuck in that fight or flight because of the trauma we've gone through.
Yeah. Also, one of my most profound lessons I learned from teaching in inner city kids, like Black and Brown youth, and even some of the clients I work with now, I think a lot of the society, we don't understand like why so many, like, let's say Black people, right? They really catch up with the Joneses. They front all these things. They live a very lavish, wasteful lifestyle when they don't have the like financial means to in a sustainable level. I think a lot of people look down and say, oh, this is why they're not going nowhere. This is why they're wasting their futures away. They don't do investment. They don't do any of that. What I learned is so many of these Black and Brown youth, for them, living till they're 18 is a dream. So if you know that based on your patterns, what's around you, your environment, historical data, if most of the people around you do not live past 18, why the heck would you invest? Of course, you spend what you have now because tomorrow is not guaranteed. Yeah. And that's the nuances. Like when you really peel back the curtain and really sit with it, you're like, oh, they're not choosing to be homeless. They're not choosing to waste their money. That's their only like conceivable option. Because what's the point of investment if there's no future to reap the benefits of investment?
So I talk about this all the time because the kids call me old. I'm 43 years old, but they make me feel like I'm 90 the way they talk to me. But some of them will say it as because we make fun of each other back and forth, me and the young guys and everything. They say it like an insult, but I never take it that way. I'm happy to be here because some of my friends didn't make it here. Some of the people I knew and grew up around, I saw them die, and I didn't think I was going to make it here. I didn't think I was going to be able. So when they call me old, I'm like, it's a badge of honor. Like I survived, and I'm here, and there's a strength in that. I don't know. I didn't think I was going to make it. The first thing I ever remember is them telling me my dad had been murdered. You know what I mean? Like, to me, that's like, so I had this intimate relationship with death where it was just going to happen soon. He was 21 when he got killed. I think it was, 23 when he got killed. Yeah.
So young.
Oh yeah. And one of my friends from childhood, 16 years old, shot in the back of the head. Like so it's just like, okay, well, when my time comes, it's going to come. So I'm just going to live like that. And then it was reinforced by the culture we were around. So
yeah, I've had 3 near-death experiences, came real close to death, right? I had the Reaper knocking on my door And because a lot of people ask me, like, what drives you to do all these things, right? Because I'm only 30, right? I'm turning 31 soon.
Wow.
And at first, I think my answer was I wanted to see how high of the view I can go based on what I think I have and God's calling. That was my initial answer. Now it has changed over time. But I practice, I call it memento mori, another Stoic practice. It's like contemplation of death. Because I've had 3 near-death experiences, right? And I think stories are powerful, but the downside of stories are people just perceive them as words and stories. But these are visceral experiences we've gone through and we feel called to share. So it's not just words and stories. These are lived experiences in a presentable form. I often I do this a lot, especially when I drive. I say, if I were to die in the next moment, get hit by a car, T-bones, what regrets would I have?
Yeah.
I do that like 6, 7, 10 times a year, like a lot, very, very often. And so when I've internalized the truth that I'm here as a miracle, because I had 3 near encounters with death, military deployment being one of them, everything I do from this point on is add-on bonus. So I could literally not do anything and I already won because I'm here, we're here. And we didn't choose this. It's not our privilege to be here. For whatever circumstances, we are still alive. That's why I go hard, because this is already an added bonus life I'm given with. So why don't I do something with it by being intentional, by being thoughtful, rather than chasing after what's popular or what the society, I don't know, say it's normal.
They say that you live 2 lives. The life you live before you know you're going to die one day, and the life you live after you know you're going to die one day. I think my second life, maybe like my 4th life.
12th life.
When my mom passed away and I was at her deathbed, and she passed away with so much regret. And then that's when it started processing. I'd always knew I was going to die, but it was just like, hey, just live for the moment. But then when she died, it was so real. I knew that one day I'm going to be looking at the roof, fighting for my last breath. And I always tell the kids that too, because I don't want to hide it from them. So I always tell them, one day you're going to be sitting on that bed and you're going to be taking that last breath and you're going to be fighting for that last breath. What do you want to take that last breath? What do you want to think about? What did you do? What did you want to accomplish? How do you want to be remembered? All that stuff, because the worst thing to die with is regret.
Yeah, like so many of my clients and people I know in life, I think they operate their life based on the approach of minimizing disappointment, especially a lot of trauma, because trauma just means you no longer feel like the world is safe. Sexual trauma, depression, anything, that's what trauma is. You thought it was safe, something happens out of your expectation, and you feel like the world is not safe. That's trauma at the purest definition, psychological trauma. That's really powerful because you really have to accept that you can do certain things in life to minimize getting let down, getting disappointed. So you live a very sheltered, safe life, air quote. Oh, had a traumatic relationship breakup, so I'm never going to pursue another romantic partner. I will only do one-night stands, superficial hookups, and I will never get hurt again. You are right. You're never going to get hurt again. You're also never going to experience the meaningful, fulfilled, committed relationship with another human you're choosing to share your life with.
Yeah.
Right? So I tell my clients, you have 2 choices in life, always. You can choose to minimize disappointments, but you will get disappointed either way. Or you can choose to minimize regrets. Because by doing something or not doing something, you will feel disappointed. You'll feel some sort of resentment or feeling, right? But at least making the choice of minimizing regrets, I think it's a battle you have to choose, right? I'm about to get married in 4 months, happily engaged. I love my fiance. Obviously, we're about to get married.
I'm glad you love your father.
Yeah. Oh, it's too late.
You're learning as a husband to always say that. Right?
Yeah.
Everywhere you go.
It's instinctive.
Yeah.
With that being said, I still think about that one girl in high school. I was afraid to ask out because I didn't want to feel rejected. That was 16 years ago. I still think about that. Not random, just random thoughts, random shower thoughts, and realize that's crazy. One inaction is so deeply rooted. I think about this 16 years later when I'm in a loving, committed relationship for life. That's power of regrets, right?
Yeah.
And regrets don't really serve you that much, but I think just data points to better inform your next decision.
That's exactly it. I don't think they serve you except for that. They're lessons. They say everything in life is a lesson or a blessing, and I think it's the regrets are a lesson that I don't. Because they say pain is a professor. It teaches you everything. And the pain of regret, I don't want to feel that again. I don't want to lose those opportunities.
Speaking of opportunities and things, I do want to maybe spotlight some of your success stories with your work and your students and congregation, not your success, but the collective success. I learned this in life. We sometimes learn more about our life and human nature from our students and mentees. Can you recall any maybe large themes that you experienced firsthand by some of the impactful stories you witnessed in your work, maybe some of your team, some of anyone, but what are some large themes that you can maybe recall?
I think some of the themes that I can recall is basically being able to withstand the pain of being different, different than their family, different than everybody, because with that is the pain of rejection, right? I've seen overall these kids who are going to do these great things, they have to be able to stand outside of the crowd. And that is really hard. But I really do applaud them for that strength, because I always say when everybody's around you is sick and you're the healthy one, they're going to say there's something wrong with you. And we've seen that over and over again as these young people start to get therapy, as they start to grow as a person. We see it over and over again where they tend to be on that outcast. And now they're being put down for going to school, going to college. One of our kids is struggling right now because he's going to college and his mom, no, you need to go to work right now. And he's like, well, I get money, I'll give you that. No, it's not real work. And so that's one of our biggest fights. And they have to be able to withstand that because this is your mom. See, even though our parents are not perfect, they are still our parents, and we want to see them as perfect, and we're the flawed ones, right? And so they have to be able to withstand that pressure, and they do, and it's amazing. But they have to have that emotional support and the support system to do that. So we always teach them about building a support system and become a support system for them in order to do that. So yeah, it's definitely that. It's just being able to withstand the different kind of pain. It's weird. These guys are so brave in certain areas that are so comfortable for them. For example, Cielo, one of our people who we love the most, she would walk through East LA down to South LA in the middle of the night at 2:00 in the morning, just keep walking through the whole neighborhoods, do all this stuff. And she was so brave to do that. But her first day in college, she was so like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Fighting because she was brave in the wrong thing. Or she was brave in something that wasn't good for her. And so it was so hard for her to walk into college. But now she does that. And now her job is to actually get kids into college. She signs them up and gets them going. That's one of her jobs with us.
Just for context, for non-LA folks, East LA and South LA tend to be more like urban, right? A risk population.
We call it ghetto, but yeah. You probably are not comfortable saying it as much as I am.
I'll let you say it.
Okay.
So we're definitely coming towards the end. And before I roll out the metaphorical red carpet for you, Pastor Bobby, I want to hit you with it's a heavy hitter question. And it's a curiosity I've had regarding any pastors out there. Because my fiance, Becky, she's a PK, pastor kid. And 95% of her church trauma are from her dad, who is a very successful pastor.
Yeah.
So put on your seatbelts, and here's the heavy current. So there is a known pattern for many great pastors and leaders to neglect their own kids because of the needed sacrifice and trade-offs. Gandhi is a prime example, who was known for his great contribution for India and great civil discourses that changed the landscape of our history. But he was also extremely negligent of his children. A lot of people don't know that. He was not a good father. Of course, he was saving the country. There's a trade-off. I grapple with that a lot because how can you love thy neighbor if you don't love your family first? And I often think about the trade-off of all these great pastors and leaders doing great things for the right reasons. At what cost? Will God really be pleased that you chose other people over your own blood? I don't know. It's above my pay grade. So I'm asking you. So what does balance look like in your life? With 5 children, a lifelong commitment, partner of 16 years, and countless youth, fatherless youth who look up to you as a father figure.
It doesn't look natural. It's really unnatural for me. You get so much affirmation from working in the community. You know, you don't get an award. You're like, when you do something great, or here with your kids, it's just doing your job. You know, it's been really hard. To be honest with you, I was so bad at it. I'm still bad at it. But I'm willing to try because, like I always said, I didn't want my real dad to be perfect. I just wanted him to be present and try, right? And so I just try my best. I'm just constantly trying and failing and being okay with failure either way. A great preacher once said, when you're at work, you feel bad for not being with your kids. When you're with your kids, you feel bad for not being at work because you don't feel like a good provider, and vice versa. So you have to be used to that feeling and get used to that feeling. And so I'm always in that feeling of like, you know, I don't feel good because I'm at work and my kids are right there and I can't play with them. And I'm probably really bad at it, but I'm learning every day. and every kid is different, right? And it's hard because I have so many kids. 5 kids is a lot, So now we're establishing certain what we call rhythms. One of them is that every week I will take a kid out. This next year, I tried at the beginning of the year. I did really good, and then I did really horrible. So I never give up. I just reset it for the next time I can do it. So this year, we're going to do the dad dates, they call them, and take my son out and just sit there and talk to him and get to know him and love him. It's not about quantity of time. It's about quality of time. I've learned that. And so it sounds kind of weird and it sounds kind of cold, but I schedule my time with them. When you schedule, you have to schedule because you schedule things that are important. So they're important. So scheduling time with them. My youngest daughter has taught me the most about it. My oldest one is manipulative. My middle son, he'll just say, "Oh, you don't want to go out with me? You don't want to give me $100? Oh, it shows what kind of dad you are." But my little daughter, she did it in a different way. She was very accepting of it. But she would say, "You did say you were going to take me to the park." And I was like, "Oh," and she's like, "But you said don't lie, Dad, but you keep telling me this, that you're going to go." And I'm like, "Oh, baby, maybe she's like manipulating too. I don't know." But I'm just and you're always going to feel that way. I think that's part of being a provider and part of how it is. And I've just had to really just work at it because it was work for me to be where I'm at now here. And now that I'm aware and more of what I'm doing to my kids by just kind of going and taking care of everybody in front of them, but not taking care of their needs, which it became aware about 5-6 years ago. Now I'm starting to focus on. And it's to some extent it's too late, but to some extent it's never too late because my son is 14 and 15, and I got the other ones when they were like 17. So it's a little different. But yeah, no, it's just always a struggle. You love these kids, but you just feel this thing. It's, what the hardest part is? Ignoring your calling. Like when I have to shut off the phone, somebody might need me. Yeah, they might need you, but somebody needs you right here. And so it's just to work at it. My hope is that I might not be able to be great at it, but my kids will be better at it than me. And I teach that to them. And I'm honest with them. I'm sorry that Dad hasn't done the greatest job. I'm trying my best. And I'm not asking for their approval for me to continue to do bad. I'm just dealing with that. I want to feel that I've done wrong so I can feel the pain so I could do better. Yeah, so that's a battle. I'm just fighting. I want to be there for my son. The worst thing in the world is I save all these kids and then I visit all these kids in jail and then I have to visit my own son one day.
Yeah.
And I've seen that over and over again. I don't want to do that. So I try my best.
So here's a harder question. Who's your favorite child? I'm kidding.
So we have an answer for that because they will ask. Even
you can't say I like them differently.
No.
That's a cop-out. That's a cop-out answer. Everyone's different. That's a cop. Everyone has a favorite.
Oh, gosh. No, but they are. They're all my favorites for different reasons. Like they're all...
What I say?
Yeah, but they're individuals. You can't. You have to. I know my mom said that. I said, but who's really your favorite? No, I couldn't do that. I could never choose that. But it's not kidding.
To be continued. No, but I want to end today's conversation by talking about the dichotomy. You say the great preacher said, you're either at home with your kids and feel guilty about work, or at work feeling guilty about kids. I think our entire conversation shows there's a third way. Be healthy, focus on healthiness, and the healthiness will convert to productivity.
Yeah.
Because I think the more effort we invest in minimizing and addressing our internal emotional incongruences, you know what you need to do, but you're not doing it. Because that awareness without action actually becomes a burden over time. You just feel worse about yourself. You feel guilty, you feel shameful. And then shame is identity-based. It's very difficult to decondition and unlearn. So let's reprioritize what's important to us so we can set up the conditions for us to show up the best in our calling. So when you're at work, you're not thinking about your kids because you've communicated with them that this is what dad's doing. Because I think displaying vulnerability to your kids is probably the one of the most powerful thing parents can do. Because kids want to know. Like I think by us shielding them from the hard truth, we're protecting them. We're not. We're just extending their future therapy by 20 years.
Not kidding.
That's a fact. So I think by you communicating that, hey, I'm not perfect, I'm trying my best, is probably the best thing that you can do. Because some of us have different callings and different strings that we're getting pulled by.
My mentor always said, bring your A game to your family. Just like if you bring your A game to work, bring your A. And then another mentor told me, the price of being great is a price you don't want to pay. And he's like, I know you want to be doing great, effective, and have this giant impact. But if you really want to be a father, then you're going to have to give up some of that. And that's probably been where it's at now.
Yeah. I mean, that's why it's important to give ourselves like self-grace.
Yeah,
right?
of course, 100%. Yeah.
Be gracious towards ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm very big on like mindfulness and compassion.
Yeah.
With that being said, before I roll out the metaphorical red carpet for you to share your projects, Passion LA, anything else, do you feel like is there anything we haven't talked about today that you feel called to put it on a giant messaging boards? I know we did talk about a lot today.
Yeah, we did. It's my ADD, man. I'm everywhere. I'm jumping around at every corner. No, I don't have ADD. I think you've done a great job. Thank you for steering this conversation, because if I had been driving, we would have been off the road. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I have the best off-road attire, so we'll be able to get you back on the road.
I hang out with a lot of teenagers, so the conversation goes where it goes.
All right. Well, Pastor Roby, like I said, not just to support you, but I really think being a pastor is a calling. And I think it's one of the greatest challenging and difficult callings, because there's a lot of trade-offs, the explicit and the implicit. And I think we talked a lot about your struggle, but your growth points and what you can do better. And the whole scheduling with 5 different kids every week, you said that on a public platform.
Yeah.
So like this is public record, literally. So there's no going back.
But the little one will remind me anyways. She'll tell me all the time.
Less gaslighting, just more guilt tripping.
Yeah.
But with hard facts.
Yeah, there you go.
Just heart bleeding truth. Yeah, where can people check you out? Share some of the projects you're excited about and anything in between.
Yeah, so passionla.org is our website. There's so much information about the things we're doing. We have 4 core programs. Passion Life Skills. It's where we work in to teach young people life skills so they can be successful and reach their dreams, especially in the urban context. We work in the juvenile halls, foster homes, and in public schools. And then we have another program, which is a faith-based program, which is a youth group for kids who won't go to church normally, at-risk kids who don't have the families. Most churches aim towards reaching families because families bring resources. We aim towards reaching kids, the young kids who don't have that family support. And so we have this youth group with a bunch of kids. We take them to camp and everything, and we develop relationships with them, help them grow. We have a Passion Leadership, which is where we develop the leadership for kids, these young people who want to say, hey, I want to stay behind. I want to reach my community. I'm not leaving. I'm here to change it. I'm going to fight for it in the way the gangs don't fight for it. I'm going to fight for it in a healthy way, because we're loyal to our soil and we're proud of where we're at. We give them a healthy way to do that. And then there's also Passion, which I'm really proud of my project. My mentor, who just passed away recently, what he would do is he'd coach leaders, young youth leaders throughout the urban area. And he would talk to them about like emotional support, making sure that they were always there and everything, and just giving them the resources. He used his network to help them. So what we did was, a while back ago, we started this, but now I'm even more focused on this is where I'm going to head we built a network called Passion Leadership Network, and it's for urban leaders. So we bring them together. We ask them their needs. We've actually connected with a therapy center that will do therapy for all of them at a very low cost. We help pay that cost, because urban leaders are one of the most traumatized leaders that are working out in ministry. And so we take them to camps. We ask them what they need, and they told us that we needed camps for their kids that were contextualized for urban kids. So we created those camps. They need conferences. So this year we're working on the Fierce Conference, which is a conference for young ladies growing up in the urban context. And we're just teaching them, empowering them to fulfill their mission. And so that network has right now 98 leaders that we're connected to, and it's growing every day, and we're just really excited. So anything anybody can do to help. Everybody always says, what can I do besides money? I always say, I don't know. There's volunteering, obviously, prayer, and just even letting people know about us. But of course, we need resources in order to reach these communities. Right now, we're going into Watts this year, Santa Ana, and MacArthur Park, because we like to go where the enemy thinks he's strongest and remind him he's not. And those are areas that are pretty tough out in the LA area. And so, and obviously now we're going to the OC with Santa Ana. Mm-hmm. So we're really excited, and just anything, connections, people inviting us to speak at their church. That's one of the things we love, in any organization. And just even connecting us with urban youth workers, anybody who's in the urban space. Most people don't know that they're actually in the urban space, and they're working with Black and brown at-risk youth, or maybe they're growing up around those urban spaces. We would love to connect with them and help them win.
Yeah, I think there are many ways of change and contribution, but one of the, like you said, easiest way is to definitely donate some resources, time or money. And since most of my audiences are global in the country, not just LA. I really want to encourage people to, make a donation. Altruism is bi-directional, right? It helps you sleep better at night. You can give yourself a pat in the back, even if it's not all pure, and you feel like you discover something and discover more avenues to help. So I'll definitely link donation link, the website and everything, the show links. Let's feel better about ourselves by also making other people's life a little bit better.
We always say that LA is one of the most influential cities in America. Helping LA influences health in the whole world.
Yeah, also the fakest city in America, but that's a different story. But, well, Pastor Bobby, appreciate your time today. Appreciate your thoughtfulness. And thanks for keeping your fake ADD in check.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. To all the listeners, thank you for tuning in as always. And I hope you discover something that's useful to you and you thought improved your life or changed your way of thinking. And if you felt this conversation resonating, I ask you to share this episode with one friend only. Free for you, but priceless for us. And with that, I hope you choose love over fear and come back in the next week's train of Discover More. Thank you for tuning in.